5 winters had passed since she vanished into the white nothingness without a trace, without a cry. And still each night he left the bowl by the door, still woke to the phantom weight of her beside him, still heard pause where there should be only silence. And though the world had moved on, frozen over and forgotten, he had not, because some absences burn louder than presence, and some bonds ignore the logic of time. Now in the dead hours, under a sky that never sleeps, something was shifting a shape, appearing at the edge of the tree line again and again, never close, never gone. Not a ghost, not a wolf, but something half remembered and fully felt, eyes that knew too much movements, that echoed memory and pain. And suddenly the silence was no longer empty. It was a question, and somewhere beneath the ice of grief, a heart cracked open, because not everything that is lost is gone, and not every return can be explained. Each day began the same way, as if repetition could dull the edge of absence. The fire cracked. In the same corner, the kettle hissed on the same rusted stove, and Thomas moved through it all like a man rehearsing the motions of a life he no longer believed in. He chopped wood with a rhythm too precise, too practiced, as though trying to keep his mind from drifting into places where memory lived. The snow around the cabin stayed untouched, save for his own tracks, a quiet map of isolation. The leash still swayed slightly when the door opened, as if waiting for weight. The bowl by the threshold was filled out of habit, not hope, a gesture that hurt less than stopping. He never spoke aloud. But sometimes in the deep quiet after dusk, he'd catch himself whispering a name into the fire, only to cough and pretend it hadn't happened at night. The wind moved through the trees in a way that mimicked breathing, and for a moment he would almost turn over expecting warmth beside him, but there was only the cold, only silence, and the unbearable presence of something missing that refused to fade, as if the very land remembered what he tried to forget. It happened fast and wrong. The kind of wrong the body feels before the mind catches up one moment. She was running ahead through the thickening white, her tail flicking like a flag, and the next, she was gone, swallowed by a wall of wind so sudden, so absolute it didn't feel real. He called her name once, twice, again and again, louder each time, until his throat tore. But the snow only answered with silence. He stumbled forward, blind against the storm. Every step, a denial, digging through drifts, as if he could claw her out of nothing. But the storm didn't care. It took, and kept, and erased. He stayed outside too long, frost clinging to his lashes, to his chest, to the desperate edges of his thoughts. And when he finally collapsed inside, shaking, he kept the door open just in case. Just in case her shape reappeared in the white. But it never did. Something in him froze that night. Something he never thawed. Days blurred into each other. He stopped keeping track of them, stopped writing in the journal they had once shared with notes and sketches and dumb jokes. The world shrank to the inside of the cabin, and the weight pressing down from above, snow muffled everything. The way grief does made it heavy, slow, hard to breathe. He stopped answering. The radio. Stopped listening for weather reports or search teams or voices. He didn't want company. He wanted her without her. The world was just noise and wind and memory. And so he sank into silence. Let the cold settle in his bones. Let time pass unnoticed, while outside the snow fell and fell and fell, as if trying to bury the part of him that still waited. Let me pause here for just a moment. And now I want to ask you, where are you listening from? Has there ever been a time in your life when someone, maybe a person, maybe even an animal, remembered you after years apart? A look, a sound, a feeling that said, I still know you. If stories like this speak to something deep in you, hit subscribe. There's so much more ahead, and I'd love to share it with you. It began not with a sound, but a feeling. A shift in the stillness, as if the cold itself held its breath. Thomas stepped outside like he always did, just to check the sky, the wind, the nothingness, and saw it. A shape low to the ground, eyes catching light, just for a second, then gone. His pulse stuttered, a trick of the dark, he told himself. But the next night, it was there again, not close, but not afraid. Standing at the edge of the trees, unmoving, watching something about the way it held itself. Struck a chord, too precise, too familiar. He tried not to hope. Hope was dangerous. It unravels the scars that time only just managed to seal. But on the third night, it returned again. Same distance, same silence, and something shifted, not out there, but in him. Memory surged up uninvited, the smell of wet fur, the weight of her head in his lap, the way she'd tilt her head when she didn't understand, but stayed anyway. The kind of loyalty that never asked questions. He couldn't sleep that night, heart tight with the ache of not knowing. Was it her? Could it be her? Or was it grief? Playing dress-up in the dark, he dug through the drawer he hadn't opened in years, pulled out the old collar, the one with the carved circle and crossed their private language, their bond. In wood and leather the next day, the figure came again. And this time, when it turned to leave, something was left behind, a trail. Not just of paw prints, but a dragged mark. Deliberate, unmistakable, a circle with a line through it, carved gently into the snow. His breath caught, and the world spun. Suddenly he was no longer alone with memory. He was standing at the edge of a question. A door half open. Should he answer? Could he even survive it if he was wrong? But some part of him already knew the past, wasn't done with him, and maybe neither was she. He sat on the edge of the porch like a man holding his breath, the old collar gripped tight in his hands. Worn smooth by time and hope, the wind had quieted. The sky was deep and still, and he could feel the world listening. Then she came out of the darkness, not rushing, not hiding, just there, slow, steady, a little thinner, a little stiff on one leg. But her movement was unmistakable. Not just the body, but the soul inside it. Thomas didn't move, afraid the moment would vanish if he even blinked. Their eyes met, and everything else disappeared. The cabin, the snow, the 5 long winters. There was only her and him, and the unbearable weight of almost believing he saw. The way she hesitated, the way her nose lifted to the air, breathing him in, the way her ears turned uncertain but curious. Then her head tilted that exact angle, the one that used to make him laugh, and suddenly his throat closed hot and full of memory. She stepped closer. The porch creaked under her weight, but still he didn't move, not even a breath. He wanted her to decide, he needed her to choose, and she did. Slowly, gently, she pressed her forehead against his chest and stayed there, trembling. Not from cold, but from something older, deeper. He whispered her name, barely more than breath. Maya, and her body answered not with words, but a sound. A soft whimper that cracked straight through him. He dropped the collar, let it fall into the snow, and brought his hands up, careful as prayer. Resting them on her neck, her fur was coarse, now tangled, but it was hers, and she was real, and she was here. The silence between them was sacred, not empty, filled with recognition, with the sudden shattering rush of knowing and being known again. Everything in him that had curled inward began to unfold. She hadn't forgotten, neither had he. And in that impossible moment, all the lost years collapsed into one heartbeat of truth. She was home, and so was he. The mornings felt different now, not louder, not busier, just warmer, the kind of warmth that doesn't come from fire, but from presence. Maya would stir before him, stretch slowly, then nudge his hand with her nose, the same way she used to, when she wanted him to wake, just to see the snow together. And he'd smile, not because he remembered, but because he no longer had to remember she was here now. When he fed her, he spoke again. Small things, names of objects, words he hadn't used in years. She listened, ears twitching, head tilted like before. And one day, she barked just once, sharp and clear, and it startled him, made him laugh out loud for the first time since the storm. They walked again, not far at first, her steps unsure, his slower than before, but the rhythm returned in silence. They wandered through, the trees side by side, not searching, not fleeing, just being. Sometimes she would stop and dig into the snow, and he'd kneel beside her without needing to ask what she sensed. And there in that shared stillness, he found something like peace. The scars on her legs mirrored the ones inside him, but neither of them looked away. They had both survived in their own quiet ways, and now they were building something not a return to what was, but a gentle reaching toward what could be every shared breath. Every glance, every curled moment by the fire became a thread woven back into something whole. And though the world outside still howled and froze, the cabin no longer echoed with absence, because sometimes what we lose finds us again. Not to erase the pain, but to give it shape, to show us we were never truly alone. And that love, real love, waits without asking and returns without warning, quiet as snow, steady as memory, warm as home. Some connections don't fade. They simply fall silent, waiting beneath the noise of life, beneath years and snow and distance, waiting for the moment the heart is quiet enough to hear again what it never truly forgot. Theirs was not a story of miracles, but of memory, of a bond that held through storm and time and silence, and when it returned, it did not shout. It simply arrived soft, certain enough. And in that stillness, something broken became whole again. Not as it was, but as it was meant to be. Because real love doesn't vanish. It endures, changes, waits. And when the moment comes, it doesn't ask why it just comes home.